The first time Kora told Adrian there would be no wedding, he was kneeling at her feet with 3 pins between his lips and one hand beneath the hem of her bridal gown. He stopped so suddenly that the silver measuring chain slipped from his shoulder and struck the marble floor. The sound traveled through the royal dressing chamber like a dropped coin in a tomb. Beyond the carved doors, 6 palace guards waited in the corridor. Beyond them, an entire capital prepared to celebrate a marriage that was supposed to end 20 years of border war. Bells were being polished. White banners hung from every tower. Bakers had worked through the night, shaping honey cakes into roses. In the lower square, carpenters were building a platform wide enough for 2 peoples who still did not trust one another to stand upon it together. And in the center of the chamber, wearing 40 yards of ivory silk she had never chosen, the bride looked down at the tailor and said, very calmly, "Do not waste your finest stitches. I will not be standing at the altar tomorrow." Adrian removed the pins from his mouth. Kora was taller than any woman he had ever fitted and broader through the shoulders than most of the palace guards. Her skin was a deep moss green, warmer where sunlight touched it. 2 short ivory tusks curved neatly past her lower lip. Heavy black hair had been braided with gold thread and pinned high enough to expose the powerful line of her neck. A pale scar began beneath her left ear and disappeared under the gown's unfinished collar. She was beautiful in a way the court painters had failed to understand. They had softened her jaw in every official portrait, shortened her tusks, narrowed her shoulders, and changed her amber eyes to a harmless brown. They had tried to make her look less like an orc and more like an apology. The woman standing before Adrian looked like neither. She looked like someone who had survived long enough to become tired of surviving for other people. "My lady," he said carefully, "is that a complaint about the dress or a warning about the ceremony?" "Both. The sleeves can be changed. The groom cannot." Adrian rose, gathering the measuring chain before it could tangle around his boots. He was 36, old enough to know when silence was safer than curiosity, and curious enough to ignore that knowledge almost every time. His dark hair had fallen over his forehead during the fitting. A chalk mark crossed one sleeve of his charcoal waistcoat, and the side of his right thumb carried the small white scars of a man who had spent his life pushing needles through stubborn cloth. "Lord Garin selected me personally," he said. "If you intend to disappear, I would appreciate knowing whether he expects me to sew a replacement bride before sunrise." One corner of Kora's mouth shifted. It was not quite a smile, but it changed the room. "You are less frightened of me than the other servants. The other servants have not watched you remain motionless for 4 hours while 12 people argued about lace. That proves I am dangerous. It proves you have remarkable discipline." He stepped back to study the gown. It had been designed by the royal council before Kora ever crossed the northern gate. Human ivory silk formed the upper half. Orc-woven crimson panels fell beneath it. Gold thread connected the 2 fabrics in a pattern of interlocking crowns. The symbolism was painfully obvious. 2 nations joined, 2 bloodlines reconciled, 2 histories stitched into one obedient garment. It was also badly balanced. The human silk pulled against the heavier orc cloth, making the entire skirt twist toward the left. Adrian had spent 2 nights correcting a problem created by politicians who believed fabric obeyed speeches. "Why tell me?" he asked. Kora turned toward the tall windows. The courtyard below was full of workers raising flowered arches beneath a sky the color of old pewter. "Because there is a knife sewn into the lining of this dress." Adrian did not move. "There are 12 knives in this room," he said after a moment. "Most dressmakers call them scissors. Not one of yours." She lifted the crimson overskirt and exposed a narrow section of ivory lining near her right thigh. Adrian saw nothing at first. Then he noticed a row of stitches that did not belong to him. They were tiny and competent, worked in pale thread, hidden beneath the seam allowance. Someone had opened the lining after he finished it. He crossed the distance between them and crouched, no longer thinking about the guards outside or the impropriety of touching a royal bride's clothing without announcing each movement. His smallest scissors slid beneath the foreign stitches, one careful cut, then another. A slim black blade fell into his palm. It was no longer than a dinner knife. There was no maker's mark on the steel, but a red wax seal had been tied around the hilt with cord. The seal bore the broken tower emblem of Kora's clan. Adrian stared at it. "That is not yours," he said. "No. But tomorrow, when the palace guards search you before the ceremony, they will find it against my skin. Lord Garin will claim I intended to murder him at the altar. My escort will be arrested. The treaty will end before the vows are spoken. And the border war begins again, with Garin holding the sympathy of every human province." Adrian looked at the blade, then at the locked dressing room door. The royal wedding had always seemed too perfect. Garin, heir to the southern marches, would marry the only daughter of the northern Orc commander. Trade roads would reopen. Prisoners would return home. Garin would receive command of the united border garrisons, while Kora's people would gain legal passage through valleys humans had claimed after the last war. Every belle in the city had been prepared to celebrate peace. Someone had prepared a knife instead. "How did you discover it?" Adrian asked. "The dress pulled when I turned. Your work never pulls." He glanced at her, uncertain whether she was teasing him. She was not. "I inspected the seam after the attendants left," she continued. "Then I sent them away this morning and asked for you alone. You could show this to the king. Garin's uncle is the king's chief minister. The captain outside served with Garin for 11 years. The witnesses who searched my baggage at the gate have already returned south. Then show it to your escort. They are watched. If one of my warriors moves toward the northern gate tonight, Garin will call it proof that we plan betrayal." Adrian turned the knife over. The red wax seal was too clean. Even a human who knew nothing of Orc metalwork might question why a clan weapon had been made from southern steel. But crowds were rarely invited to examine evidence before they became angry. "You said there would be no wedding," he murmured. "What will there be instead?" "An empty room. By sunset, I will be beyond the western wall. The western wall is 200 feet high, 183. That correction does not make your plan better. There is an old laundry channel beneath it, sealed with an iron grate." For the first time, she looked genuinely surprised. Adrian returned the knife to the table and folded his arms. "My mother washed palace linen for 27 years. When I was 9, I attempted to escape a beating by crawling through that channel. I reached the grate, became stuck in mud, and had to call the man I was escaping from to pull me out." Kora considered him. "Were you beaten?" "No. My father laughed too hard." That almost smile appeared again. He should have called the guards. That was the sensible choice. He was a tailor, not a spy, soldier, or diplomat. His responsibility was to fabric, fit, and the payment of his workshop rent. If he became involved, Garin could take his business, his freedom, or his head. A royal tailor who helped a treaty bride escape would be remembered for exactly as long as it took to build a gallows. Then Adrian imagined the black blade discovered tomorrow. He imagined Kora held before thousands, while men who had planted the evidence pretended to be shocked. He imagined the border farms burning again, because every cautious person had decided someone else should act first. "The laundry channel will not work," he said. Kora's expression closed. "Then forget what I told you. I did not say you could not escape." He walked around her slowly, studying the gown with new eyes. "I said you cannot escape through the laundry channel." Her gaze followed him. "What are you thinking?" "That this dress requires a more practical hem." He lifted the outer skirt and examined its weight. 12 pearl buttons fastened the ivory train. Decorative cords joined the crimson panels at the waist. The stiffened bodice restricted Kora's reach, and the gold-threaded overskirt would be visible from half a mile away. But a garment was only a collection of choices. Every seam could be opened. Every layer could conceal another. What looked ceremonial from the outside could become something entirely different with the correct construction. "Return at midnight," Adrian said. "Wear your riding boots beneath the cloak. The guards will not allow me to leave my rooms. You are the bride. Demand another fitting." "And then?" He met her amber eyes. "Then we make certain that when you walk out wearing a wedding dress, no one realizes you are dressed to run. If you enjoy original Orcbound fantasy romances and want to support the creation of future stories, you can join Tales from Orc on Patreon. The link is waiting in the description. Now, back to Kora and Adrian. The guards searched Adrian when he left the royal wing. They checked his sleeves, his leather tool case, and even the lining of his boots. Adrian complained loudly about bent needles and the cost of imported chalk until their attention weakened. The black knife remained hidden inside the only place they did not inspect. The padded shoulder roll he had removed from Kora's gown and draped over one arm like discarded fabric. He carried it through 3 courtyards, down the servants' stair, and across the city beneath a freezing drizzle. His workshop stood in Threadneedle Lane between a candlemaker and a woman who repaired musical instruments. The front window displayed 2 winter coats, a child's blue festival jacket and a gentleman's waistcoat no gentleman had yet paid for. Adrian locked the door, lowered the shutters, and placed the black blade beneath his brightest lamp. Under magnification, the deception became clearer. The edge had been ground using a southern wheel. The cord was northern goat hair, but it had never been exposed to smoke. Kora's clan cured its weapon cords above cedar fires, leaving a scent that lasted for years. This cord smelled faintly of rose soap, palace soap. Adrian wrapped the knife in plain cloth and hid it inside a hollow roll of green velvet. Then he cleared his cutting table and began to destroy the most expensive garment he had ever made. He removed the train first. The pearl fastenings became quick-release toggles. The crimson overskirt split into 2 panels that could wrap around Kora's legs like a riding coat. He replaced the tight inner sleeves with flexible lacing, opened the side seams, and inserted narrow pockets large enough for food, coins, and folded papers. Beneath the ivory silk, he added a layer of charcoal wool. If Kora released 6 hidden hooks and turned the garment inside out, the royal wedding gown would become a dark traveling cloak. It was the most dishonest dress Adrian had ever made. It was also, he thought as dawn threatened the eastern windows, the first honest thing connected to this marriage. At noon, one of Garen's stewards arrived with a sealed order. The final fitting had been moved to midnight at the bride's request. Adrian was to bring the gown personally. No assistance, no delay. Beneath the official lines, Garen had added a note in his own hand. Make her beautiful enough that the crowd forgets what she is. Adrian read the sentence twice, then he held it over a candle until the edges blackened. He did not burn it completely. Instead, he extinguished the page and placed it beside the hidden knife. The day passed in fragments. He purchased dried meat, a water skin, a plain gray cloak, and a pair of gloves large enough for Kora. He visited the dye market and asked questions about delivery carts leaving through the western gate. He learned that every wagon would be searched until after the wedding. He paid a stable boy for information and discovered that Garen had doubled the guard at the North Road. By evening, Adrian understood that helping Kora reach the wall would not be enough. The city had become a closed fist. At 11, he packed the altered gown into a cedar chest. At past, 4 palace guards arrived to escort him. The streets were bright with premature celebration. Lanterns hung from balconies. Children chased one another beneath white ribbons. A group of musicians rehearsed the wedding march outside a tavern, stopping every few bars to argue about tempo. No one noticed the tailor walking toward the palace with evidence of treason hidden beneath folded silk. The dressing chamber was colder than before. The fires had been allowed to die, and frost feathered the corners of the windows. Kora waited alone in a plain linen shift and dark leggings, her black braid hanging over one shoulder. Without the ceremonial jewelry and layered cloth, she looked less like a duchess and more like the warrior she had been before. The treaty selected her body as its signature. Adrian set the cedar chest on the table. "Did they search you?" she asked. "Twice. Apparently tailoring shears become more dangerous after sunset." "Did you bring the knife?" "Yes." "Give it to me." "No." Her eyes narrowed. Adrian opened the chest. "If you are caught with it again, the truth will no longer matter. I have hidden it somewhere safer." "Where?" "I am still deciding whether I trust you with that information." Kora took one step toward him. The top of his head reached barely above her nose. She did not threaten him. She did not need to. "You are helping me escape a palace," she said. "Trust seems implied." "Trust is never implied. That is how people end up wearing knives they did not pack." For a moment, only the wind at the windows spoke. Then Kora nodded once. "Fair." Adrian lifted the altered dress from the chest. Her expression changed as he explained each hidden fastening. He showed her how the train detached, how the outer panels reversed, how the ivory bodice folded beneath the charcoal layer. He demonstrated the concealed pockets and the flexible seams. The transformation took less than 30 seconds when he performed it. "You made armor," she said. "Cloth armor?" "For retreat." "For choosing the battlefield." Kora ran one green thumb over the hidden stitches. "My people would call that a warrior's answer." "My people call it an invoice." This time she laughed. It was a low, surprised sound, as if laughter had escaped before she could stop it. Adrian found himself staring. The official portraits had missed that too. They had painted her solemn because solemnity was easier to display than life. Kora noticed his attention. The laughter faded, but the warmth remained in her eyes. "Turn around," she said. Adrian obeyed while she changed. He listened to silk whisper across skin, to the click of hidden hooks, to the soft curse she gave when one sleeve caught her braid. His imagination tried to become unprofessional. He occupied it by counting the tiles in front of him. "You may look." The gown no longer appeared divided against itself. Adrian had moved the crimson panels upward, letting them curve across Kora's waist before falling in clean lines. The ivory silk framed rather than disguised her green skin. He had removed the excessive lace from the neckline and shaped the collar around the scar beneath her ear instead of hiding it. Kora stood before the mirror without moving. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing." "You are frowning at my best work." "I am trying to understand why it looks like me." Adrian approached, stopping behind her reflection. "Because I fitted the dress to the woman. The council fitted the woman to the treaty." Her amber gaze met his in the mirror. No one has ever made anything for me that did not first ask what use I would be to someone else, she said. The honesty of it left Adrian without an easy answer. He reached toward the unfinished collar, then paused. May I? Kora's eyes shifted to his hand. He had touched her throughout the earlier fittings, but always through layers of ceremonial fabric, always beneath the impatient observation of attendants. This was different. The scar began where the collar needed to settle. His fingers would have to brush the skin below her ear. After a moment, she nodded. Adrian adjusted the silk with the back of 2 fingers. Kora's skin was warm. She held perfectly still, but he felt her breath change. He withdrew at once. Too tight? No. Does the scar hurt? Not anymore. Then what is it? Kora looked away from the mirror. You asked. He understood more from those 2 words than she seemed to intend. People had handled her as a soldier, a prisoner, an envoy, and now a bride. He wondered how many had mistaken her silence for permission. I will ask every time, Adrian said. Kora looked at him again. That may become inconvenient. Good tailoring often is. For the next hour, they rehearsed the transformation until Kora could release the train and reverse the gown without assistance. Adrian marked a route through the oldest part of the palace. The servants' passages led to the royal theater, where scenery wagons would leave before dawn to clear the wedding square. If she hid beneath the painted panels, she might reach the eastern warehouse district. From there, however, every gate remained guarded. I have a cousin among the river pilots, Adrian said. If we reach the old dye docks before sunrise, he can carry you beyond the southern checkpoint. Kora went still. We? You do not know the servants' passages. Draw me a map. The passages have been rebuilt 6 times. Half the doors are unmarked, and 1 staircase ends inside the royal pantry. Then describe them. Kora. It was the first time he had used her name without a title. She noticed. If Garin discovers that you helped me, she said, you will lose more than your workshop. If Garin succeeds, many people will lose more than workshops. You do not owe my people your life. No, but I owe myself the ability to live with it. The answer displeased her, perhaps because it gave her nothing to argue against. She turned toward the window. Below, servants carried the last flower garlands into the courtyard. Snow had begun to fall, small white flakes dissolving against the glass. There is another reason I cannot allow you to come, she said. You do not trust me. I trust you more than I should. Adrian felt the room narrow around them. Kora continued before he could misunderstand. That makes you useful to anyone trying to control me. Garin already chose me because he thought I was useful. And you intend to prove him wrong? Repeatedly. Her almost smile returned. Then a key turned in the outer door. Kora moved faster than Adrian's eye could follow. She swept the detachable train across the table, covering the food, gloves, and charcoal cloth. Adrian snatched up his measuring chain. By the time the door opened, he was kneeling at her hem again, pins ready between his lips. Lord Garin entered without knocking. He was handsome in the deliberate manner of a statue commissioned by its own subject. 2 guards followed him. The fitting is private, Kora said. Nothing about tomorrow is private. Garin circled her and placed one hand against the back of her waist. Adrian's needle stopped. Remove it, Kora said. Garin obeyed slowly, making the gesture an insult. Then he ordered Adrian to lower the neckline. That would weaken the gown, Adrian replied. The bride has final authority over its fit. The treaty has final authority over the bride. The room fell silent. Garen's smile returned only after he realized how much the sentence revealed. "Finish by dawn," he said. "At first bell, the gown will be searched and sealed. Until then, no one leaves this room." He nodded to the guards and walked out. The lock turned again. Adrian remained bent over the hem, though he was no longer sewing. "First bell is 3 hours away," Kora said. "Yes. Your theater wagon leaves in 4. "Yes." "We are locked inside." "Also yes." She looked toward the high windows, 120 feet above the courtyard. "Do not tell me the exact measurement. It encourages you." Kora examined the chamber. 1 door, 3 windows, a cold fireplace too narrow for her shoulders, cabinets full of ceremonial veils, a standing mirror large enough to conceal a person but not remove one from the palace. Adrian's gaze stopped on the gown. "What?" Kora asked. Garen made one mistake. Only one. He locked a tailor inside a room full of cloth. Adrian began with the veils. There were 9 of them, each made from 6 yards of silk gauze. Alone, none could support Kora's weight. Twisted together and reinforced with the gold cords from the gown's original train, they became a rope strong enough to pull a carriage. Kora watched him knot the lengths with quick, practiced hands. "Do all tailors know how to escape towers?" she asked. "Only those with unpaid creditors." "How many do you have?" "At present, fewer than Garen." He anchored the rope around the stone column between the windows. Kora tested it once, pulling hard enough to make the column groan. "The courtyard is watched," she said. "We are not going down." Adrian opened the narrow window and pointed across the gap. 20 feet away, the sloping roof of the Royal Archive joined the bridal tower 1 floor below. Snow had collected on the slate, turning it silver beneath the moon. Kora leaned out. "You expect us to swing." "I expect you to swing. I expect to regret every decision that brought me here. You cannot hold the rope and follow. That is why I made this." He showed her the final length, looped through a brass curtain ring. Once they reached the opposite roof, a sharp pull would release the knot from the column. Kora stared at him for a long moment. "You planned that while pretending to adjust my hem. I do my best thinking near dangerous women." The words left his mouth before caution could catch them. Her brow lifted. Adrian cleared his throat. "Dangerous circumstances." "Of course." He helped transform the gown. Ivory silk vanished beneath charcoal wool. The crimson panels wrapped close around Kora's legs. She pulled on the plain gloves and dark cloak, while Adrian packed the remaining food into his tool case. "You first," he said. Kora climbed onto the window ledge. Snow blew into the chamber around her. For an instant she balanced there, a dark shape against the moon, then gripped the rope and pushed away. She crossed the gap without a sound. Her boots struck the archive roof, slid half a yard, and stopped at the gutter. She secured the rope around a stone chimney and signaled Adrian. He climbed onto the ledge. The courtyard below looked much farther away from outside the window. "I should tell you," he called softly, "that I dislike heights. You should have mentioned that before insulting the Western Wall." It seemed less relevant then. "Hold tight." "Excellent advice." He pushed off. For one breath, there was nothing beneath him, only cold air and the distant shine of stone. His hands tightened. The improvised rope twisted. He struck the edge of the archive roof with his hip and lost his grip. Kora caught him by the wrist. Adrian hung over the courtyard, boots scraping uselessly against slate. Above him, Kora lay flat against the roof, with one arm locked around the chimney and the other holding his entire weight. "Do not let go," he whispered. "I had not considered it until you suggested it." With a low breath, she pulled him upward. Adrian found the gutter, then the roof, and collapsed beside her in the snow. Kora remained on one knee, still holding his wrist. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Only in places I will complain about later." She looked at their joined hands and released him. The absence of her grip felt unexpectedly cold. Adrian pulled the rope free. They crossed the roof, bent low beneath the tower windows, reached a maintenance hatch, and descended into the archive's upper gallery. The building smelled of dust, wax, and old leather. Rows of locked cabinets rose through 3 floors. Moonlight entered through stained glass, painting the floor in faded blue and red. Somewhere below, a clerk snored beside a dying brazier. Adrian led Kora along the gallery toward a spiral stair. They had almost reached it when voices drifted upward. Garen's voice. Kora seized Adrian's sleeve and pulled him behind a cabinet. 2 men entered the reading chamber below. Garen carried a lamp. The second wore the red sash of the palace guard captain. "The tailor is still with her," the captain said. "He will leave at first bell." And if she found the blade, she would have raised an alarm. Northern honor is tiresomely loud. Garen set the lamp on a desk. "Search the gown yourself. Replace the seal if necessary. At the altar, wait until I take her hand. Then find it. The king may demand an inquiry. He may have one. By the time scholars decide where the steel was forged, Kora's escort will be dead, and the Northern army will have crossed the river. Your uncle promised command of the river forts. He promised you 2 of them. Do not become ambitious before we succeed." The captain lowered his voice. Adrian caught only fragments. Eastern gate, hired archers, northern colors. Kora's hand tightened around his sleeve. Garen opened a cabinet and removed a long document case bearing the king's seal. "Once she is accused," he said, "this order closes the passes and places every border regiment under my authority. The king believes it is a precaution. He does not understand that war rewards the men already holding the keys." "And the Orc witnesses?" "The archer above the chapel has instructions. Kora will never reach a cell." Adrian felt Kora go utterly still beside him. Garen returned the case to the cabinet. "At sunrise, bring the captain of her escort to the lower barracks. Tell him the bride requests a private meeting. Make certain none of them remain near the square." The 2 men left. For several breaths, Kora did not move. "We have to take that order," Adrian whispered. "The cabinet is locked." He produced a steel hook from his tool case. "Is that a tailoring instrument?" "For buttonholes." "That is a lockpick." "Anything is a lockpick if buttons are expensive enough." They waited until Garen's footsteps disappeared. Adrian descended, knelt before the cabinet, and worked by the light of one shaded candle. The lock resisted him. His first hook slipped. The second bent. "You have done this before?" Kora asked. "I have opened sewing chests belonging to clients who misplaced keys." "How many of those chests contained royal war orders?" "This is my first. Please allow me to enjoy the occasion." The lock clicked. Inside lay dozens of sealed documents. Adrian found the long case and removed the order Garen had described. It bore the king's genuine signature authorizing the border closures if violence disrupted the wedding. Alone, it proved little. Garen's plan remained only words overheard in darkness. Kora searched the cabinet. Behind a stack of tax ledgers, she found a narrow account book bound in blue leather. Payments had been recorded in code, but several entries carried the broken tower emblem. One listed Southern Steel, Northern Cord, and a palace seamstress. Another named the chapel roof and 4 archers. "This is enough," she said. Enough for whom? The king. If we reach him. A bell rang outside. Not first bell, an alarm. Above them, the archive doors slammed open. They found the room empty, Adrian said. Kora thrust the documents into the reversible gown. Which way? Down. They ran through the reading chamber. Adrian knew only one route from the archive to the Royal Theatre, and it crossed the illuminated map hall. Voices filled the upper gallery behind them. Boots struck the spiral stair. At the map hall, 2 guards appeared through the opposite door. Kora tore the dark cloak from her shoulders, revealing the ivory bridal silk beneath. "What are you doing?" Adrian whispered. "Being the bride." She strode into the hall as though she owned it. The guards stopped so quickly their spears crossed. "My lady?" Kora's expression became royal ice. "Which of you ordered my wedding portrait moved without my approval?" The younger guard blinked. "Portrait? The western gallery is empty. Lord Garin expects the unveiling at dawn." "We received no." "Then find the curator." She pointed toward the archive stair. "Now." Both guards looked at Adrian. He lifted his tool case. The frame tore the train. Again. Somewhere behind them, a man shouted that the bride had escaped. Kora stared at the guards. Must I repeat myself? They ran toward the archive. Adrian and Kora walked in the opposite direction for exactly 10 dignified steps before breaking into a sprint. The Royal Theatre occupied the palace's oldest wing. Its backstage corridors were cluttered with painted trees, false columns, and canvas clouds. Adrian found the scenery wagon waiting beside a loading door, but the horses had not yet been harnessed. "Plan changed," he said. "You have another?" "I am a tailor. Changing plans is what clients call breathing." He led her beneath the stage. A trap door opened into an abandoned costume cellar connected to the old storm drains. The drains would not carry them beyond the wall, but they ran beneath the palace kitchens and emerged near the lower city. Behind them, the alarm spread from tower to tower. They descended into darkness. The drain was barely high enough for Kora. When a patrol entered the tunnel, she pulled Adrian into a narrow recess and shielded him with her body. The soldiers paused only a few feet away, discussing Garin's order to capture the tailor alive. Kora held a stolen knife beside Adrian's head, while he felt the controlled rhythm of her breathing through the charcoal layer of the gown. After the patrol passed, she offered him another chance to remain behind and claim she had threatened him. "No one who sees this dress will believe that," he whispered. Her worried expression almost became a smile. They continued until a rusted ladder brought them into a storeroom behind the palace bakery. Adrian opened the outer door a fraction. The lower courtyard swarmed with patrols, and Garin himself stood beneath the north arch. Adrian realized the seamstress named in the account book might possess the replacement blade and the testimony they still lacked. He covered Kora's transformed gown with a baker's apron and hood, dusted her green face with flour, and gave her 2 baskets of raw dough. Soldiers searching for a royal bride ignored the servant carrying their breakfast. Minutes later, Kora and Adrian reached the wardrobe wing unseen. They crossed beneath Garin's balcony. Adrian could hear him ordering every water gate sealed. Kora's jaw tightened beneath the hood, but she did not look up. At the wardrobe wing, Adrian knocked 3 times. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. Kora shifted the baskets. Buttonhole tool? Bent in the archive. She placed one green hand against the door and pushed. The lock tore free from the frame. "That was walnut," Adrian said softly. "Was." Inside, a single lamp burned above a work table. A gray-haired woman stood beside it, holding a second black knife. She looked at Adrian, then at Kora's flour-covered face. The knife fell from her hand. "Please," she whispered. "They have my son." Kora closed the broken door behind them. The seamstress spoke quickly, as terrified people do when silence has protected them for too long. Garen's men had taken her youngest son 3 days earlier. They promised to release him if she opened the bridal lining and inserted the blade. She had obeyed. Afterward, the guard captain had delivered another knife and ordered her to keep it until dawn. "Where is your son?" Kora asked. "The old armory beneath the chapel." "How many guards?" "2 outside. I do not know within." Adrian picked up the second blade. It matched the first perfectly, including the false clan seal. "Will you testify before the king?" he asked. The seamstress shook her head before he finished. "They will kill him. They intend to kill you both once the wedding begins," Kora said. The woman's face collapsed. Kora removed the flour-covered hood. She looked less like a royal bride than a soldier who had run out of patience. "Listen to me," she said. "My people are housed in the north guest wing. Reach the alley behind it and throw 3 stones against the upper shutters. Pause, then throw 1. Tell the warrior who answers that Kora orders them to remain inside until she comes. Use those exact words." "They will not trust me." Kora pulled one of the iron rings from her braid. A tiny clan mark had been carved inside it. "Show them this." The seamstress closed her hand around the ring. "What about my son?" Kora glanced at Adrian. He knew that look too. The plan had changed again. "We will bring him out," she said. After the woman left through the rear passage, Adrian turned on Kora. "The old armory is beneath the chapel." "I heard her." "The chapel with an archer waiting to kill you. 4 archers, according to the account book. Still refusing comfort from accuracy." Kora removed the baker's apron and began reversing the gown again. Crimson and ivory emerged from beneath charcoal. She fastened the warrior panels around her legs and tested the knife she had taken from the guard station. "You can remain here," she said. "You keep offering me that option, as though I might suddenly become sensible." "Why are you doing this?" The question stopped him. "I told you. You told me about border farms and living with yourself. Those are reasons to expose Garen. They are not reasons to enter a guarded armory for the son of a woman who betrayed me." Adrian looked down at the second black blade. "My mother once ruined a duchess's gown," he said. "Wine fell across the front 2 hours before a royal banquet. The duchess accused her of doing it deliberately and demanded she be imprisoned. The master tailor knew it was an accident. He remained silent because defending a laundress might cost him his position." Kora waited. "My mother spent 6 months in a workhouse. I was 11. The master tailor visited years later and told her he was sorry. He explained all the reasons he had been unable to help." Adrian wrapped the false knife in cloth. "She forgave him. I did not. You believe courage is refusing to remain silent. No, I believe courage is expensive. People who call it easy usually expect someone else to pay." Kora's expression softened. "And what price do you expect?" she asked. "Ask me after we survive." She stepped closer. There was flour in her black braid and a smear of it across one green cheek. Adrian raised his hand, then remembered his promise. "May I?" Kora glanced at the flower he indicated. "Yes." He brushed it away with his thumb. The gesture took 1 second. The awareness it left behind seemed to last much longer. Kora's amber eyes lowered to his mouth, then returned to his eyes. "After we survive," she said quietly. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. They separated. Adrian took the palace account book Garen's burned note and both false blades. Kora took the king's sealed order and the guard knife. Then they left through the wardrobe passage and headed toward the chapel. The wedding sanctuary had been transformed overnight. Thousands of white flowers covered the stone columns. Gold lamps illuminated 2 carved seats before the altar. Human and orc symbols had been arranged in careful equality, though the human crown stood 1 step higher. No one was present. The alarm had emptied the chapel staff into the palace corridors. Snow lights shone through the high windows. Kora and Adrian crossed beneath the gallery where the archers would wait at dawn. "The armory entrance is behind the altar," Adrian whispered. Kora looked at him. "My mother cleaned here too. Is there any part of this palace you did not attempt to escape as a child?" "The wine cellar. I was caught entering." Behind the altar, a stone stair curved downward. 2 guards stood at the bottom. Kora removed the crimson panel from one shoulder and handed it to Adrian. "What are you doing?" "Choosing the battlefield." Before he could object, she stepped into view. The guards saw the missing bride and reached for their swords. Kora threw the knife. It struck the first guard's scabbard, pinning it to the wooden bench behind him. As he struggled, she descended the final steps, caught the second guard's wrist, and turned his sword harmlessly into the wall. One movement of her shoulder sent him to the floor. The first guard freed his scabbard and charged. Kora seized the crimson cloth from Adrian, snapped it across the man's face, and pulled him off balance. His helmet struck the stone with a dull clang. Neither man rose. Adrian stared. "You used the overskirt as a weapon." The stitching held. He felt absurdly proud. They found the seamstress's son, locked inside a storage cage with 2 northern merchants and a palace messenger who had apparently seen something he should not have. Adrian opened the lock with a key taken from the unconscious guard. The boy was perhaps 17. He clung to Adrian's sleeve until Kora promised his mother was alive. "There is a coal passage behind the old furnace," one merchant said. "It leads to the street." Kora sent all 4 prisoners through it with instructions to reach the north guest house. "Come with us," the messenger urged. "The palace is searching every room." Kora looked toward the chapel stair. Not yet. When the prisoners disappeared, Adrian understood. "We are not escaping anymore." "Garen expects me to run," she said. "He has closed every gate and placed his men between me and the king. If I flee, the court will hear only his version." "What do you propose?" Kora looked up through the ceiling toward the altar prepared for her. "I told you there would be no wedding." Her tusks showed as she smiled. "I did not say there would be no ceremony." By first bell, the palace had announced that the wedding would proceed. Garen could not admit the bride was missing without surrendering control of the story. Instead, servants told the gathering crowd that Kora had withdrawn for a northern prayer. The delay, they said, was a charming difference in custom. Musicians repeated the same processional until their fingers stiffened. Nobles filled the chapel. Representatives from every border province took their seats beneath the banners. Outside, thousands waited in the square. The king entered through the eastern doors, surrounded by his personal guard. Garen stood at the altar in white and gold, smiling as if nothing in the palace had changed. Then the wedding bells began. The western doors opened. Kora entered alone. A murmur traveled through the chapel. She had removed the charcoal traveling layer and restored the gown to its ceremonial form. Ivory silk caught the morning light. Crimson orc woven panels moved at her sides. The shortened train followed without attendants, and the collar curved deliberately around the scar beneath her ear. She did not look like a woman being delivered to a husband. She looked like a commander approaching a battlefield she had chosen. Garen's smile tightened. His gaze dropped to the gown, searching for signs that it had been opened. He found none. Adrian had returned both black knives to the lining, each inside a separate transparent pocket of fine netting. Beside them rested the blue account book, Garen's burned note, and the king's sealed order. One pull on the concealed gold cord would open every layer at once. Adrian watched from behind the carved screen reserved for palace craftsmen. He wore a borrowed court coat over damp clothes. His tool case rested against his leg, empty except for one pair of shears and a coil of red thread. He had never felt more conspicuous in his life. Kora reached the altar. Garen offered his hand. She did not take it. The priest hesitated, looking toward the king. "Before vows are exchanged," Kora said, her voice carrying through the chapel, "Northern custom requires the maker to name what the bride carries into marriage." Garen's face did not move. That custom was not included in the ceremony. Neither was the northern bride until your council needed her. Several orc witnesses rose in the rear gallery. Kora's brother stood among them, alive and armed. Beside him waited the gray-haired seamstress and her son. Garen saw them. For the first time, fear entered his eyes. "This is a human chapel," he said. "We will follow human law." The king leaned forward. He was an old man, and weariness had carved deep lines beside his mouth. But his voice remained clear. "A treaty ceremony honors both peoples. Let the custom be observed." Kora looked toward the craftsman's screen. "Master Adrian," she called. Every head turned. Adrian stepped into the aisle. His legs felt less reliable than they had above the courtyard. He walked between rows of nobles who had ignored his existence during years of fittings. Now they examined him as if he were an unexpected stain on royal silk. He stopped beside Kora. Garen spoke through his teeth. "Think carefully, Tailor." "I have," Adrian said. "It kept me awake all night." A nervous ripple of laughter moved through the chapel. Kora turned her back to him and raised her braid away from the collar. Adrian found the first concealed fastening. "May I?" he asked. The question was quiet, meant only for her. Kora looked over her shoulder. Before the king, the court, her brother, and an entire city waiting beyond the doors, her expression softened. "Yes," she said. Adrian pulled the gold cord. The gown opened. Not indecently, not violently. The ivory overskirt separated into two sweeping wings, revealing the crimson traveling garment beneath. The detached train fell flat across the altar steps like a ceremonial banner. Sewn within its clear lining were the two identical black blades, the blue account book, the sealed military order, and Garen's half-burned instruction. Gasps replaced the wedding music. The king rose. Adrian lifted the first knife by its netted pocket. This blade was planted inside Lady Kora's gown after the final daytime fitting. The second was delivered to the palace wardrobe to replace it if she discovered the first. Both carry a false northern seal. Both were made using southern steel. Garen laughed, but the sound arrived too late. "A tailor gives judgment on steel now?" "No," Kora said, "but your account keeper did." She removed the blue book and held it toward the king. The guard captain moved. He had been standing near the chapel column with one hand beneath his red sash. Now he drew a narrow blade and rushed toward the altar. Kora turned, but Garen seized the open train and wrapped it around her sword arm. The captain came from her blind side. Adrian threw his shears. They did not strike the captain. Adrian had never thrown a weapon in his life, and the shears passed a full yard from the man's shoulder. They cut the cord holding the flower canopy above the altar. The wooden frame crashed down between the captain and Kora. White roses exploded across the floor. The captain stumbled. Kora tore the silk from Garen's grip, drove one shoulder into his chest, and sent him backward over the carved wedding seat. The king's personal guards surrounded the captain before he rose. Above the chapel, bowstrings sounded. 4 archers appeared in the gallery wearing northern colors. Kora pulled Adrian behind the fallen flower frame as the first arrow struck the altar. Her brother and the northern escort charged up the gallery stairs. Guests scattered between the pews. The second arrow buried itself in Garen's white coat, pinning his sleeve to the wooden seat. "They are shooting at me," Garen shouted. "Poorly," Adrian said from the floor. The third archer lowered his bow when he found 3 orc swords at his throat. The fourth tried to flee and ran directly into the seamstress's son, who swung a brass candlestand with both hands. The archer collapsed beneath a shower of wax. Silence returned in pieces. The king's guards dragged the captain into the aisle. Kora's brother brought the captured archers down from the gallery. Beneath their northern cloaks, all 4 wore the gray uniforms of Garen's southern regiment. The seamstress stepped forward. Her voice shook, but it did not break. She told the king about her son, the first knife, and the threat against both their lives. The released palace messenger described the prisoners held beneath the chapel. One northern merchant recognized coded payments in the blue account book. Finally, the king opened Garen's sealed order and compared the signature to the date of the earliest payment. The wedding had not merely been expected to fail. It had been built to fail. Garen pulled against the arrow, holding his sleeve. This proves nothing. The orc woman escaped her chamber. She attacked royal guards. She entered the archive and stole sealed documents. All true, Kora said. The chapel turned toward her. She stood amid fallen flowers, wearing a gown half transformed into traveling clothes. Snow had melted in her braid. Flour remained near one pointed ear. The controlled royal mask was gone. "I escaped because a knife was sewn against my skin," she continued. "I struck guards who imprisoned innocent people. I took documents describing how my escort would be murdered and my people blamed. If your law names those acts crimes, then judge me for them openly." She looked at the king. "But do not call this marriage peace. Peace that requires one person to surrender her body, her name, and her right to refuse is only a quieter kind of conquest." No one moved. Outside, the crowd had fallen silent enough to hear her through the open chapel doors. Kora faced Garen. "You wanted the city to watch me become your wife." She removed the gold wedding chain from her waist and let it fall at his feet. "Let them watch me say no." The sound of the chain striking stone carried farther than Adrian expected. Then someone in the rear gallery began to applaud. It was not an orc. An elderly human woman in a border merchant's robe stood with both hands raised. Another person joined her, then one of the palace servants, then a soldier who had lowered his spear when the archers were exposed. The applause spread through the chapel and out into the square. Garen stopped. The king looked older than he had when he entered. He ordered Garen, the guard captain, and the 4 archers arrested. He suspended the border command and called for a public inquiry before representatives of both peoples. Then he descended from the royal platform and stood before Kora. "I asked you to carry peace for all of us," he said. "I did not ask whether the burden would crush you." Kora studied him. "Then ask now." The king bowed his head. "Will you remain as northern envoy while we write a treaty that does not require a wedding?" Kora looked toward her brother, then toward Adrian. "I will remain long enough to see whether your actions can be tailored to fit your words," Adrian tried not to smile. The king did not try. The inquiry lasted 42 days. Garen's records exposed the weapons, hired riders, and forged messages prepared to restart the war. A new treaty eventually opened the river road and created a council with equal northern and southern authority. No marriage sealed it. During the negotiations, Kora visited Adrian's workshop with increasingly unconvincing requests for repairs. A loose glove became tea. A perfectly good belt became supper. Away from the palace, they discovered the ordinary parts of one another. She hated sweet wine and loved terrible street music. He argued with stubborn fabric and could not hold a sword without threatening his own boots. By the time winter softened into rain, neither could pretend their meetings were about tailoring. On the morning Kora was expected to return north, Adrian waited at his workshop window. He told himself he was checking the weather. He told himself her departure had been discussed for weeks and therefore could not surprise him. He told himself that what had grown between them had never been promised a future. By midday, the northern procession passed the end of Threadneedle Lane. Kora rode beneath a burgundy banner, wearing the charcoal traveling cloak he had made from her wedding gown. She did not look toward the workshop. Adrian watched until the last rider disappeared. Then he returned to his cutting table and discovered he could not remember what he had intended to make. The bell above his door rang. Kora stood inside. Snowmelt darkened the shoulders of her cloak. Her heavy braid lay over one side of her chest, decorated with the iron rings she had given the seamstress. She had apparently left the procession by the next street and walked back alone. "You missed your escort," Adrian said. "They know the road." "And you?" "I know where I am." His heart gave one hard, painful beat. Kora closed the door behind her. "You said I should ask about the price after we survived." "I remember." "What did helping me cost you?" Adrian considered the question. 1 cedar chest, 9 ceremonial veils, 2 bent button hooks, a pair of excellent shears, most of my respect for palace architecture. "Adrian." He stopped. She moved closer, but not close enough to touch. "It cost me the ability to pretend I would be satisfied if you simply walked away," he said. Kora's breath left slowly. "Good," she replied. "I was afraid the price belonged only to me." For once, Adrian had no clever answer. Kora raised one green hand toward his face and paused before touching him. "May I?" she asked. He smiled. "That may become inconvenient." "Good." "Yes." Her palm settled against his cheek. The first kiss was gentle, almost cautious. Kora bent because she was taller. Adrian placed one hand at her waist and waited until she moved closer before holding her. She tasted faintly of bitter tea and winter air. The second kiss carried all the certainty the first had asked permission to find. When they separated, her forehead rested against his. "My escort returns north today," she said. "You mentioned that." "I return in 3 weeks. The new council appointed me permanent envoy." "A remarkable coincidence." "I threatened 6 ministers." "That sounds more likely." She looked around the workshop. "I will need rooms in the city. There is an empty apartment above the candle maker." "Too far." "That is 12 steps." "Exactly." Adrian laughed, and Kora kissed him again before he finished. They did not hurry after that. Trust had been the first thing between them, and neither wished to handle it carelessly. Kora traveled north and returned as promised. Adrian visited her homeland in spring, where half her clan challenged him to prove he could survive mountain weather, and the other half requested formal coats. Kora's brother watched Adrian for 3 silent days before asking him to repair a torn sleeve. Among northern orcs, this apparently counted as acceptance. 1 year after the false wedding, Kora entered Adrian's workshop carrying a bolt of dark green silk. He looked at the fabric, then at her. What am I making? A dress. That narrows the possibilities. She placed a second bundle on the table. Inside lay crimson thread, ivory buttons, and one small iron ring from her braid. There will be no council, she said. No soldiers, no treaty banners. My brother insists on attending, but I have warned him not to bring an axe. Adrian's hands became very still. Kora's tusks showed with her smile. This time, she said, there will be a wedding. He came around the cutting table. Are you asking me to make the dress or wear the matching coat? Both. That is an unreasonable commission. Will you accept it? Adrian looked at the woman who had first stood before him dressed as someone else's peace offering. He thought of hidden knives, silk ropes, flower-covered braids, and the gold cord falling at Garen's feet. He thought of every time she had asked before touching him, because he had once promised to do the same. Yes, he said, but the bride has final authority over the fit. Kora drew him into her arms. The second dress contained no secret blades. It did contain 6 pockets, flexible shoulders, a detachable train, and enough room for Kora to dance without asking cloth or custom for permission. Adrian stitched the iron ring beneath the collar. Where it rested against the scar, she no longer allowed anyone to hide. They married in the courtyard, behind his workshop beneath red leaves and plain lanterns. Humans and orcs stood together without assigned sides. The seamstress and her son brought bread. The king sent wine Kora refused to drink. Her brother brought the axe, but used it only to split firewood. When the brief ceremony ended, Adrian asked before kissing his bride. Kora answered by pulling him down to meet her. The first gown had been designed to turn a woman into a treaty. The second was made for Kora, and every stitch held.